There are massive cultural differences, language differences, hobby differences, mindset differences.
This is the hard part about talking about the British class system, because you also have to put in, obviously, British culture, but also all the other cultures that live here.
The class system is still very much enforced because we're doing it to ourselves.
Oh, we are definitely doing it to ourselves. The modern class system and the bullshit that we currently live in. I'm Garcia.
I'm Izzy.
And welcome to Informally Informed. So today I wanted to talk about the modern class system, what that actually looks like in our current day society. Because we touched on we obviously did an entire video on this, on the British class system. So hopefully you've watched that so you know where we're at. But just an overview. Britain has like 5 class systems: the aristocracy, the upper middle, lower middle, which we sort of...
No, the aristocracy, upper, the middle, the working, and the underclass.
There you go. And even though we live in a society where it's very difficult to change your class, there is quite a bit of blurring. So I know that when I researched this topic, I only looked at it from what I would describe as the change of the New World Order, right? From 2020 to where we are now in 25.
Out with the old, in with the New World Order.
I know that you looked at it a bit earlier than that. So do you want to start with the early ones?
Yeah, so I looked at it from the point of view when I was doing research for my class system one, and how it was sort of related to politics and how everything was much simpler. 2016 and before that, because of the whole Brexit thing. So it used to be that Labour was predominantly the working class. Conservatives was predominantly the middle and the upper class, although nowadays the Lib Dems tend to be more of the middle class. The Labour is no longer for the people.
Bullshit.
You've got other... No longer for the working class, I should say.
No longer for the working class.
You've got other parties that are coming up, and a lot of Labour is now middle class.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Labour has active disdain from the working class in what they deem as too stupid to vote the way they want,
or benefit scroungers, which is what they term everybody in the middle class, in the working class as.
And this, I would argue that actually a lot of the time with Brexit, which was 2016, it was a Thursday in June, that it was very much a difference in class. A lot of working class people voted for Brexit, and those that didn't, the middle classes, a lot of the upper classes, turned around and called everybody that didn't vote the same way they did as stupid and racist. Uneducated. And it just, their true colours of how they really felt about the working class came out.
Mm-hmm. Even though...
And that was Labour. So a lot of working class people now have complete disdain for Labour.
Yeah.
And that's been the sort of, especially with parties like Reform and stuff like that, the political landscape over the last 9-10 years has shifted into this new way where class no longer necessarily dictates the way you vote. Obviously, the red wall is still a thing, and obviously I know people that tell me that no matter what happens, they're never ever going to vote
a Tory, yeah,
etc. Because that's a cultural thing that's been handed down from generation to generation. But now those same people are saying, well, who do I vote for now? Because I made a promise to my granddad that I was never going to vote for Tory. But I know I've made a promise to myself that I'm never going to vote for Labour again. They're going to Reform.
Yep. So what I'm looking at here is how the, whilst, because obviously we've just established traditional distinctions of class still exist in the UK, all right? But it's a bit more fluid and tied more to lifestyle, cultural capital, education, income now than it ever has been. All right. So the upper middle class, because I also went through a class list, because like I said, it's looking at how it looks now compared to how it looked then. So like you said before, the landed gentry, the ridiculous people that we don't care about. Think more like Sunday Times. No, not even Sunday Times. Like, yeah, Country Squire. Like Mayfair, financier, those kinds of people. The Yeah, they're the people that make the Sunday Times rich lists.
Yeah.
In our modern society, they're the ones that make the rich list because of the land that they own, not necessarily because of the cash money that they have. Okay, but that's shifting quite a bit now, because now your Alan Sugars, for example, have left what was no matter how we try and say, well, they came from the working class, they came from the working class. But now they're the ones that are mixing shoulders because they've got more money and can now purchase the estates of these crumbling estates that are falling apart.
But they are still working class people.
They're still working class people,
just because money is not the only thing that the class system originated.
I understand
due
what
to
you're
money,
saying, but I'm looking
anymore.
at it from a modern lens. From a modern lens, they are now the aristocracy, because you were looking at it from a working class perspective. They're the ones with land and money. Things have changed. So these old ways that we used to look at the aristocracy and now those people are renting their houses out on Airbnb. So the upper middle class, obviously now they are comfortable in affluence. That's the main difference. But not quite old money.
Not old money at all.
No, but they could have been. But they're older money than, they're like post-war old money. World War II old money. Not old money from the 1600s when they were building railroads. They're not JP Morgan, right? They are now, though, old money in a sense that their grandparents were doctors at the time when the NHS came into power and people they had to be employed as doctors, and they were paid a wage that was higher than the working class. So they built that. They were the ones that could afford to buy property after property that's now become, much like yourself, slumlords. You know what I mean? They're the landlord class these days. A lot of the upper middle class are the landlord class. Okay?
So just regular landlords, not slumlords.
You're just regular landlords. But they tend to own more affluent properties. Okay? So examples of this is like the Guardian Reed and Commuter family with the Volvo or Tesla these days. They tend to be what we look at as the upper middle class. Okay?
Yes. Because the genuine upper class ain't buying Teslas.
But the genuine upper class no longer, they're fizzling out. They're fizzling out. That the days of that they've had to be dragged into modernity, and with the way that the world is going, they're fizzling out because they cannot afford those years of affluences. Like you said, it took one bad apple.
You're talking about the aristocracy, not the upper class. Sorry.
No, I'm still talking about the upper middle class because they
Who's fizzling out?
I was talking about the upper middle class, but I'm saying that the aristocracy are fizzling out because they can no longer.
Sorry, you said the upper class was fizzling out. Right, okay,
my bad. Yeah. They're fizzling out because they can no longer afford their sphere of influence is lessened, and as such, so is their affluence, so is their ability to do these things. And
I mean, it hasn't.
Yep.
I think they're desperately trying to grasp onto the old ways.
Yes.
But I don't think their sphere of influence has... Going to elite parties is a sphere of influence.
It is.
And having big, fancy, stately homes that you grew up in.
However, if you think about things that have happened recently, such as Queen Elizabeth dying, Andrew, the failure, Prince Harry, it's brought them down a peg, shall we say. Modern society has brought them down a peg.
Are you talking about the aristocracy or the royal family?
I'm talking about the aristocracy, but in terms of sort of...
Because the aristocracy doesn't really get involved in scandals.
This is true.
Because that's one of the cultural differences. The aristocracy are very, very private people, as the royal family are supposed to be.
They used to be not involved in scandals, but there's been many a scandal these days with the aristocracy. So they're not used to it. They're having to, navigate
Modern technology.
Modern times. So let's talk about the established middle class. Okay, so we've done the upper middle. This is now the established, no longer called the lower middle. They are the established middle. They are the ones that have, let's say, in the 80s they were your nurses. They're now psychologists. Their parents were psychologists. Their fathers were doctors too.
They've handed down herbal tea and oat milk through the generations.
Fuck you. They're mid-level professionals. Okay, teachers, managers, small business owners, like you said, but that also now includes small business owners. Okay, so previously, small business owners would have been like your plumbers and stuff. They'd have been working class no matter what they did, but now they're the established class. No, they're the established class because corner shops.
If you're talking about money alone, but I wasn't talking about money alone. I'm talking about culture. Can I also ask a quick question? When you're saying then and now, roughly what time period are we talking about? Because I said 2016.
This is true, but I'm also looking at it. I guess I'm looking at it from.
Did it happen 50 years ago? Did it happen 10 years ago? 5 years ago?
I'm looking at it how they are now, but how they got there. So they got there. I'm talking post World War II. How they got there. We didn't used to have
sort of like a transition period over the last 50 to 70 years.
Yeah. So, to how we got here, because it wasn't overnight. So they're the ones that came over in the 50s and 60s to rebuild the country and started corner shops, right? Those corner shops have now become a lot of like look at Nisa, the shop. It's an Indian family that owned that, I think. Somebody correct me on that. And that it was a shop, or Patak's. Better example.
Was Nisa a chain?
It's a chain. Patak's is a better example. They're the curry company. It started with a family in the 50s and now it's a big conglomerate, okay? They were once the working class, if you will. Selling their curries out of their houses. I don't know, I'm just making shit up because I assume that's how they sold it. To where they are now. Now, they're the established class. Because they've established that they've got a grounding in society, in community. They rub in shoulders, but they also value home ownership, family holidays, and stability. They're more meritocratic.
The family business is more
meritocratic than heritage based.
Mm-hmm. The family businesses,
because they started as family businesses, but then now they're looking at it. They look to hire the best as opposed to just because. So less nepotism. Okay. Less nepotism.
But I also think if you own a teeny tiny little corner shop and your daughter wants a job, absolutely. I don't think there's anything wrong with nepotism in that sense. If it's a little family business, you want to hire your relatives, go for it. But that's my opinion.
We don't own a corner shop. Neither here nor there. If you owned a corner shop, I'd be in the sweets. I'd probably be dead. Let's just be honest, because I'd be eating you out of sweets. I love sweets, but diabetes. Anyway, so Tony Blair.
This is how we got there.
I know. Well, I don't think this is how we got there.
I'm pretty sure it's how we got there.
Anyway, Tony Blair coined the campaign in the 1990s, Mondeo Man. Right, it represents the aspirational swing voting middle British man or woman. We don't discriminate, and that's where that term came from. So they drive a Ford Mondeo, work hard has a mortgage, and is politically centrist.
Whatever that means in today's society.
I mean, I'm politically centrist. Anyway,
in your opinion, but if you speak to somebody else, they might think you're far left. They might think you're far right. They may think you're a number of other positions.
I self-identify because how dare you assume my identity, my political affiliation as a centrist. Anyway, they're the symbol of Middle England, socially moderate and economically pragmatic. Okay. Then the lower middle class. So they're traditional. The lower middle class are now the traditional working class. Okay, from your video to this. So they're the skilled manual workers, tradespeople, lower level clerk, staff, retail supervisors. All right. And the reason that they've got a strong sense of practicality, self-reliance, and community, which you would have gotten in the previous definitions of the working class. All right. So the example archetypes of this is the white van man, because now you can have. There was a man, actually. I saw him on a clip, and he's a plumber. Started as a plumber, and then he built his own business and sold it for millions and millions. And now he's rubbing shoulders with the best of the biz or whatever it is. You know, businesses all over the gaff. The gaffer. He's a gaffer. I know it sounds weird coming out of my mouth. Anyway, yeah. But it's used as a symbol of grafting. Okay. Because you have a job, you're established in that. You're lower middle class, you have a mortgage. Because that's what that means now. All right?
There's loads of working class people that have mortgages.
There are loads, but they're not now. They're not now working class. They are now the lower middle.
I don't agree. But anyway, we'll come to that at the end. Because I have read what you're going through previously.
Have you?
When I was doing my research on the 7 different things and what it means from I've been through it.
The Mondeo man and everything.
Not the Mondeo man bit, that's a new term for me. But what the classes now mean and how they relate to what they were. As you were going through it, I had a conversation with my new best friend, ChatGPT. And he/she/it went through this with me. And
this is also on the government website.
Yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, we'll go through your points and then we'll have a discussion about the whole thing.
I was saying about the new working class. So the new working class are people that literally can. They're a politically diverse mix of non-voters. They're populists. They will go for the pragmatic voter. They are the pragmatic voter, Labour or Conservative, and that's it. Okay? And then there's the underclass, who are now the people with limited access to education. They're now the people with... Because I know that education up until a certain point is free in the UK, but there's also a significant portion of the UK that can't read or write.
Yeah.
Yep. So in terms of like... It's not just around accents anymore or where you actually come from. It's literally about who you rub shoulders with now and how you have lifted yourself. Because these days, the underdog story, people love a story. People love a story, okay? And because the uppity ones are now dying out, the old people are dying out, those that upheld those old class systems because that's how they remembered it.
I disagree. I do disagree because I've spent obviously a lot of time in the only of the 5 main classes that I went through, the aristocracy, upper middle, working and underclass. The only one that I've not really spent a significant amount of time with is the aristocracy, right? The other 4 groups I've spent a significant amount of time with. And there is still those cultural barriers. There is still this idea of self-segregation. There is still this idea of we don't like those other classes. Do you like? And you brought in self-identification. I'm talked to doctors that tell me that they're working class. People. I understand because I looked at the government website and I read this. But I just don't agree because of this. You can tell, like, if you can say to somebody, I can tell which class David Beckham came from by having a conversation with him, that means he's still in that class because there are massive cultural differences, language differences, hobby differences, mindset differences, and people are still... I don't think there's ever going to be a time, because it's human nature, where people are not going to want to hang out with people that are like them. Mm-hmm. So we are, through social norms, reinforcing these 5 main class systems, because class in the UK, I mean, you're right about a lot of the things you're saying with regards to the money and rubbing shoulders and all that kind of thing. But that doesn't mean they're going to fit in, and that doesn't mean the upper class people that have been raised upper class are not gonna be looking down on Alan Sugar. It's not. It doesn't mean that Alan Sugar's not going to go out for a meal with these upper class people and think what a bunch of snobs or whatever it is he's thinking about them.
I understand that, but let me touch back on what you just said about culture. Okay, so I guess this is the hard part about talking about the British class system, because you also have to put in obviously British culture, but also all the other cultures that live here. All right, because I said this in a previous video about all the other cultures and where you think you sit in modern Britain.
And that's the question I've been thinking about, and I don't know the answer.
Oh, I don't know the answers either.
You can't, like, an Indian family that have come over here and decided to
Rishi
create... Rishi Sunak's upper class. He was born and raised in this country.
His wife.
I don't know anything about it to comment. But an Indian family... I literally have never even seen a picture of this woman. Somebody told me she was a billionaire once. Good for her. But other than that, I've got no clue. But an Indian family coming over, deciding to create their own corner shop, they've not been brought up in that culture in the same way that Rishi Sunak has, right? They fall outside of the class system. In a similar way that if I was to move to India, I would fall outside of the caste system.
But
so
they
instead
don't
of trying to
fall
fit
out
people,
of the class system. They don't. Because when
in
you
terms
live
of
in
culture, they do.
In terms of culture, they do. But in time, it's those things where the class system works because it's compounded by society, culture, and all the other shit that goes into that. That's what makes it. That's what holds it. That's what keeps it together. All right. But when we're now in a situation where, I mean, whenever we talk about Britain, we're talking about Britain as a whole. But I also understand that a lot of people see Britain as just London, which go read. Anyway, the London is a melting pot of places, but it's also where a lot of the wealth, where people think a lot of the wealth is centralized, okay? And I say where people think a lot of the wealth is centralized because the land-owning gentry, apart from the they
don't live in London.
They don't live in London. Like, they don't live in London. They may own property in London, but they certainly don't live there. So when I think...
Because who'd want to do that, am I right?
I don't know, 3 a.m. sushi.
No, absolutely not.
I don't know.
I don't like London. I'm not a London person. Anyway, what's your point about
3
London?
a.m. sushi would be good. I was saying that they don't live there. So when they're talking about and they're doing these researches as to what people look like, they're not looking at the UK as a whole. They tend to just look at London and what they see around them. Because society...
Who's there? Because I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about British culture as British culture. In the class
I'm talking
system.
about British culture as British culture, but British culture doesn't exist in a bubble. British culture is a culmination of a lot of cultures. Mm-hmm. And so when they're incorporated into these things, a lot of people make their own versions of this stuff. And so when I think of the upper class, right, the upper class, I think of okay, there's this show.
What do you think? Like,
I'm going to tell you, there's a show. I think it's called Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey, yeah.
Downton Abbey. I've not seen it. That's what I think of. Because I think of upstairs, downstairs people. All right? But we don't live in that society anymore.
Just because, well, the working class no longer are selling flowers on the streets like Eliza Doolittle, but nobody thinks of the working class as Eliza Doolittle. True, society's moved on. The upper class is not the same as it was when Downton Abbey was about.
With the reality that we have, wherein the people that are the landowning gentry cannot afford, they're cash poor. They can't afford it anymore. I look at this program that I was watching one time about a year ago, and it was literally these people that were brought up in upper society, all of the rest of it, and they live in one room of a castle because they can't afford to heat it, and the rest of it is crumbling. And I think of those people, and I'm like, we're looking at them still as the aristocracy because of all the cultural things that go along with them, but they then had to downsize into Middle England, essentially. Did they lose that? No, they didn't. But they're no longer rubbing shoulders with those people.
My question is, why are you telling me this? Like, what's the point of you talking about the aristocracy and how it's changed? Because I'm
saying that in modern society, the way that it was viewed of the class system, what we view it as now is different. But I also think that it's still there, obviously, but like with everything, it changes. Like the wind.
Yeah, but it's far more rigid than a lot of people think, and I can see it just hanging out with working class people. Like, you can feel it in the way that they talk and things that they say about, oh well, like I told somebody in work, one of the porters, really is one of my favourite porters, generally get on with him. He said, oh, well, what have you got any other podcast episodes coming up? And I said, I'm going to do one on the British class system. He's like, what about? I was like, just explaining it. And he was like, oh, I'm not, well, we're going to disagree on that. And I'm like, why? All I'm doing is explaining the class system. And I was like, why do you think we're going to disagree when I'm literally, because he's like, well, we come from different classes. I'm like, that doesn't mean we're going to disagree on definitions. We're probably not going to disagree on the definitions. But this idea that there's always going to be conflict because people come from different classes is deep rooted and still there within society, very much so, specifically within the working class. The way they talk about, oh, you don't have a right to say this about that because you're middle class, as they would say, or like the comments they're making about Rishi Sunak and people like Rishi Sunak saying, oh, I've got middle class friends, I've got upper class friends, I've got working class. Oh, well, maybe not working class friends. Like, he said that, right?
He did say that, I remember.
So this is all very, very modern stuff that's being said. And I understand that things are changing and that financially, money is a lot more fluid now. You can become rich overnight, you can lose it the next day. Somewhat like 90% of the richest 1% or whatever started for nothing. And a lot of the rich people end up losing money. Like, money comes and goes, but those cultural things is what bounds it together. And although the class system originally came based on how much money people had and this divide within that,
the factory
those
owners
cultures,
and the factory workers.
Yes, those cultures became ingrained. And as we move forwards, although the money aspects changed, the class system is still very much enforced because we're doing it to ourselves.
Oh, we are definitely doing it to ourselves. For this, I say scrap it all. Anyway, I'm going to end that there. So yeah, tell us what you think about the class system and where it's at modern times. Who do you agree with?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Do you think it's... Although I think it's changed, I still think it's far more rigid than what Garcia does, or do you take Garcia's view that things are more fluid than they used to be?
Yeah.
And we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one. Let us know if you agree or disagree with any of our views. That's the point of the conversation. Join in.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.